In this video, I'm going to show you how to use rubbing alcohol and eyedroppers to make the most intriguing layered collage papers. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist, and welcome to Tune In Tuesday, where I share weekly art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in my videos, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to my channel. Links for all the supplies to make these papers are down below under Show More. And while you're there, check out my free 5-day class where I show you how to use all the papers created during Tune In Tuesday to make fabulous collages the very first try. So let's get into creating collage papers with rubbing alcohol. This is where we're headed. We're going to make these very yummy papers that are incredibly richly textured. And this is, I call this a first cousin to the eyedropper paper that I did a couple weeks ago. But that was actually dropping paint, very watered down paint from an eyedropper. This is actually putting the paint down first and using alcohol to create all these layers. Now, this is many, many layers, by the way. This is at least, each one of these is at least 4 layers. And in between layers, I have to let them dry before I can put another layer. So what I want to show you is how to make very simple papers doing this. And that's actually how I started doing this. Last year, I did this same demo, but I only did 1 layer. And it was a totally different thing when you just do 1 layer. When you do multiple layers, you get this incredible richness that is very hard to replicate without multiple layers. So let me put these away. Now, let me tell you about the supplies. So you can do this with copy paper, just plain old Xerox paper, with mixed media paper, but I'm using 104 pounds, not the really heavy 140 pound. So it's 104 pound. And all of this will be in the description down below when this gets posted. You can use watercolor paper. You can use book pages. You can use almost anything. You also need rubbing alcohol. Now I'm using 70%, but 91% rubbing alcohol also works. A dropper. So I've got a few of these little eyedroppers. And also acrylic paint. So I'm going to walk you through doing several of these. Oh, the other thing you need is some flat brushes like this and a water source, which I'm actually going to put this in the camera so you can see me doing this. So I've got a little bit of water in here. So here's my palette right here. I've got 3 different colors and alcohol. I'll put that right there. So this particular page, I do believe, this is a piece of copy paper. And the copy paper is actually 28 pound. So it's not the cheapest version, although it'll work on that too. But I like when I do collage papers, I like doing a little bit higher quality paper. So it's 28 pound. So how we're going to start this. Now, by the way, I have already put, and you can see this, it's a coat of gloss medium on this to coat the paper. It's not necessary, but you get a whole different effect if you start with a piece of gloss or gloss coating on here compared to going straight on the paper. And I'll show you the difference in a few minutes. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to start with a light color. So I've got kind of a baby blue here. But before I do that, I'm going to lightly dampen my brush. So I'm just going to dip my brush in here. And if you can see this, I'm actually trying to get most of the water off. I don't want a lot of water on here. And I'm going to quickly paint on here. Now, this is the tricky part, is knowing how much moisture to put down here. You put too much and you don't get the effect. You put too little, you get nothing at all. There's a couple ways to create this, and you got to work really fast here. I'm going to actually sprinkle this right from the bottle. So you already see these gorgeous dots. And by the way, these dots as they're coming down, this could be the end paper right here. I wouldn't have to do anything else. In fact, when I get off camera, I probably will make a couple just like this because this light color is something I really need. I have a really hard time getting light values in a lot of these papers that I'm demoing on you. So we're going to put this aside for a minute. I took the same technique. This is the same thing. It's copy paper. This is splattered on, but then now this is dry. Now I have 2 choices here. I could leave it just like it is. I think this is really pretty the way it is. And that's how I used to do it until I realized I could add a whole bunch of layers to this and create something really spectacular, at least to me it is. Now I could add a coat of gloss medium here. And when you add gloss medium, I'll show you the effect of this. This is one that is done, obviously. So on this side, I had a coat of gloss medium before I did my splatters. On this side, I didn't. You can see the difference. This is much more diffused. This is some of the lines here are just much more crisp. So either way it works, and it takes more time to have things dry in between. So if I want to get a layer on here, I want to do a contrasting color. So these blues are too close to this. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush again. In fact, I think I'm going to use a new paintbrush just because I don't want any of that paint on there. Get as much of the water off. And I'm going to put this really rich blue on here. By the way, this is phthalo blue with a little bit of black and a tiny bit of white. Now this is really thick and I don't want it thick. Add a little more water. And I want to get this pretty evenly on here. I don't want any heavy paint anywhere because wherever it's really heavy, the alcohol will not do the magic. Okay, so now I'm going to do, just so I have a contrast in what I'm doing. This is 70% alcohol, and I'm just going to do an eyedropper. Now the eyedropper actually is my kind of tool of choice because I have a little more control about where it goes, although it's not as organic, it's not as fun in terms of what I get. But you can already see these little drops I've put down are already spreading quite fast. So the kind of the tricky part here is knowing how wet to make this paint at the same time as how much alcohol to put down, because the more alcohol I put down, the wetter it gets, the more it spreads. So I think that, by the way, I have a closed studio right now because I'm filming for you. But usually my studio is open. I have my windows open. So doing this with my windows closed, I realize this is kind of potent with the alcohol. I'm going to close that up. So I think that is absolutely, and this could be a finished piece right here. Although, why make it finished? But I'm going to show you some other kind of, like this would be my second layer, but I do 3 and 4 and 5 layers to make it even richer. Let me put this one down. Now, this is actually mixed media paper. It's 104 pounds, which is not that thick, really. I usually, when I do my collages, it's 140-pound paper, so it's more like watercolor paper or Bristol paper. This is much more thin paper, and I like this for collaging quite a bit for the collage papers. All right, so for this one, I think I'm going to do, let's put down a thick coat of the blue. And again, so if you can see this paint is pretty thick without the water. Let's add a little water to my paintbrush. Now this is my first coat. So, and again, the first coat, the way I demoed it last year, that first coat was the only coat. That was it. So this time, let's do our first one with the drops. And to be perfectly honest, this paper, just doing what I'm doing right here, this is a finished piece to me. I don't need to put layers on this. I think this is really quite stunning. Now, because the paper's wet, or the paint's wet, and this dropper is putting more wetness on here, this spreads quite a bit. So I wanna place these little dots pretty far away from each other. Otherwise, they will blend into each other, which, by the way, is also perfectly fine. Depends on what kind of look you want. But I love that right there. Now, again, I have to let this dry before I do anything to it, but I've already got one prepared. This is the one I just did. Look how much it's already spread. So this was splatters, right? So it's already kind of organically done this new pattern to it. So that's why when I put another layer on top of this, it's going to look very different than it looks like right here. Okay. This is mixed media paper, and I've already done those splatters on it. So let's put a layer of a darker color on it now. So I've got, and why the layers look so beautiful is because I am doing contrasting colors. So they kind of pop against each other. Now I've experimented with all different kinds of thicknesses of this paint. But it basically doesn't work unless the paint is fairly wet. But if you get it too wet, then everything just runs together. Make it kind of even there. And for this one, since I already had dots on it, I want variety. Another way of doing this, so I want splatters this time, since I already have dots. Look at this, my fingers have a little bit of alcohol on them. So another way of doing it is just to take your hand and put it in your hand and put it down. In fact, I think that's even prettier than the other ones I was doing. But it is quite wet. So it is going to create, all the little dots are going to go into each other. But gosh, I love that, to be honest. If it would just stay the way it is and not keep moving, because it's going to look very different in 5 minutes, because all that wetness is going to create new things. Although I think I could actually stop right there. But I love how the design underneath comes up underneath it. I just got to show you this one. So this is one I just did a few minutes ago. I mean, this is so beautiful. Although it's so tempting to put more layers on everything, which of course I'm going to do. So this is a piece of music paper as well. And I coated it with gel medium. This does work better. Particularly, this is an old book. So the cheaper the paper, the more I want to coat it, because it's going to protect the paper. So for this one, I do want to do splatters. So let me do this kind of tealish color. In fact, I'm going to make this color a little more teal. I'm going to make it a little darker, just because I want more contrast in here. Spread that around. Now it's probably too dark. Hey, what do you think? And you don't need a lot of paint for this. Yeah, that's pretty good. I like that. Okay, so let me take a little bit of this and okay, so this is pretty wet. I think I'm gonna do, we'll do splatters with this too. So I just barely let it fall from the bottle. Now, I don't have to have that gloss medium as a barrier. That's not necessary. But what's going to happen is this is going to turn into, well, this is splatters, just like this is. But see how it's kind of pushing farther and farther away. And it kind of, this is only the first layer though. So I've made layer on top of layer on top of layer, and this is the end result. I mean, that is pretty scrumptious. But it's because it's got like 4 layers. Each one is dried in between. Now, I'm going to put this one aside, and I'm going to actually take a big risk. This one's actually got a lot of layers on it. And I put a layer of gloss medium on top. I wouldn't have to. I could do it right on the piece, but that was just my choice at the moment. So even though I love this piece, I am going to add some of this baby blue to it and see what happens. So we'll add now this may be too heavy, so we'll see what happens. It looks pretty heavy from my angle here. Nope, it's working. You know right away if the paint's too heavy because you don't get these rings. But I love what's happening underneath here. Even though I love the original version of this, and you can kind of make it do different things by kind of like just dropping it places. Like if I just barely touch that, I get little tiny rings. Yeah. Now, I probably wouldn't I probably wouldn't stop here either. More than likely I'll let this dry and put something else on top. Although this is actually a light value piece. I may just let it go and let it be exactly the way it is. I made a ton of these, and actually I made notes of exactly how many layers. This is 1, 2, 3. This is 4 different layers on here. But whenever, like this one is okay, but it's not like, oh my God, I just love this thing. So I don't want the paper to be curled at all. So I'm going to be, by the way, this is, I believe, mixed media paper. And I did put a coat of gloss on it, but again, I wouldn't have to. Once I have a coat of acrylic paint on it, it already seals it, so it accepts what I'm going to put on top of it much better. But what you can see here, this was splatters, and it didn't have a barrier of gloss medium before I put those splatters on. So you can see the edges are kind of like all kind of mushing together, which is still pretty. So I am going to, I think I'm going to use, no, I think I need to put a really light thing on it. So this paint right here isn't that watery. So if anyone who wasn't here last week, I'm actually doing this on MDF boards. They're 3/4 inch MDF boards. They're fabulous to both do all your artwork on, but they're really good for demos. Right. So I'm gonna put drops just to make some contrast. And guys, I just love seeing those darker circles come out. But again, if I put too many of these on here, like if I put too much of this alcohol on here, they'll more run together. And that's lovely design too, but I lose, like this is already running together because I got so much alcohol plus the paint's really wet. But I mean, that's a whole different look than what I had before. And I like that a lot better. That's a nice kind of medium dark value, which I like. Again, I put a gloss medium on this. By the way, the only reason there's tape around here, which is not necessary, it's just to keep the paper flat. I think this is it's mixed media paper. But sometimes the paper curls so much, and if it curls, this is wet, so everything falls off. You know, you get more running, and I don't want running. So let's see what we're gonna do here. This and this color are different. So I'll put some, it's not that wet. Again, I gotta make my brush not have too much paint on it. But see, this is like almost painting. Like I'm painting with almost full strength acrylic, which will make this technique not work. It's way too, I think it's gonna be too, well, by the way, another way of doing this is to take a water bottle. You know, I was curious to see if I could do almost the same thing just by dropping water on it. And you can see there are some kind of droplets there, but it really doesn't do the same thing. So let's see, we'll take a little bit of the water. So to end my sentence there, if I put water, you're not going to get these distinct rings. You get a little bit of movement, which is lovely, but you don't get the rings. Now this is a lot of alcohol. So this is going to it's going to run a lot. But now that design that was kind of ho-hum, in fact, I think if I take this, hold on, I'm going to take this extra light off. You can see that better. It was just a ho-hum design. Now it's just much richer. I like that a lot better. So what I did is I picked out some of the papers that were good, but they weren't great. Like this is okay. It's not my favorite. So I think this would look really pretty with a layer of darker paint on it. And again, that's way too thick. I can tell just when I put it down. So in some cases, you know, the paint does get a little thinner because I'm putting a wet paintbrush into it, but it's not thin enough. Basically, you want the design to show underneath. So that's how I know it's not showing completely through, but I can see the design. That way I know that I'm not putting the paint on too thick. Doing it out of an eyedropper really is my favorite thing. I just love seeing a little bit more control over how much alcohol gets put down. Now, these sides are curled up, which makes the alcohol run down. And that works too. I just like it. I don't have as much control when it does that, but that's good right there. I'm good. And I can just fill in a couple little dots. I'm not even squeezing anything. I'm just like tapping it and getting a little bit of alcohol. So love that. Re-edit it. So this one, I was gonna do something too, but the more I looked at it, the more I loved it. You know, it's just very, like you can't tell what I did because there's so many layers on this. I could put a dark layer on this and it would look spectacular, but I love this light color. I think I'm gonna leave this alone. Okay, so here's one that's still wet. I just did with you. And one of the things I discovered is that, if I can see this, there's a lot of pooling of the paint there. Now I could, you know, let this run. You know how you make drips? That's one thing I could do with this, and that's kind of interesting. But another interesting effect is to take a shop towel and just mop up. Like you can get the whole another look from, look at that. I love that. So I'm making some marks that are kind of unexpected as opposed to leaving this huge pool of paint. Now, you know, it's kind of like two techniques in one. You know, I'm doing the, you know, layers of alcohol, but I'm also getting a whole nother look by mopping up. And I actually like that better. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool right there. Now, knowing me, I will probably put another layer on this because why let good enough alone? So look at that one. I mean, this one didn't run that much. And just because I'm tempted to do this, I'm gonna take my little thing here again. So I love how kind of like almost perfect this is, but of course, why leave perfect alone? So I'm gonna see what happens if I just, yeah, just get a little bit of texture going, which, yeah, I think that's really pretty. Not that I didn't like the dark blue, because I did. But, you know, it's kind of hard when you hear this thing in your head that says, what if you try that? You know, you just got to kind of follow it. And I call that intuition, you know, my higher self saying, just play, don't worry about it. Anyways, I like that even better. So, you know, the cool thing about this technique is you can make it simple like this. I think this is a fantastic collage paper. Or you can do many, many, many layers and get something that's, you know, incredibly rich in terms of layers. But I don't think one is better than the other. I think both of these have value, you know, in terms of using them for collages. So I am going to call this done. So thank you for coming along with me. Thank you for showing up every week, many of you. And we'll have another paper demo next week. Actually, next week, I think I'm going to do another session of Ask Me Anything. So think of your questions, anything about business, about art, about paper making, you name it. I am open to answering it. So bless you all. Thanks for coming. And I'll see you next week for Tune In Tuesday at 2. Bye, everyone.